I want to start today's episode with a story, one that comes up often in senior transitions. A family calls me after their parent has already moved into assisted living. They're overwhelmed, confused, and quietly panicking. The care costs more than expected, staffing feels inconsistent, communication is fragmented, and the family keeps asking the same question: did we make the right decision? Here's the hard part. Most families don't realize how much they don't know about assisted living until they're already inside it. And today's guest is someone who understands that reality from inside out. I'm Dale Corpus, a senior transition specialist and seniors real estate expert based in the San Francisco Bay Area. As someone in the sandwich generation myself, I know how overwhelming it is to juggle work, parenting, and aging parents, often while trying to make decisions inside a system that doesn't always explain itself. I created the Simplify Senior Transitions podcast to make senior care conversations clearer, more honest, and more human. And my promise to you is this: every episode brings real stories, practical tools, and expert insight to help families move forward with confidence instead of stress. Today's conversation is about what families aren't told, not to scare you, but to prepare you. My guest today is David Hahklotubbe, a gerontologist, former assisted living owner, professor, and death doula. David has built senior care from the ground up, worked inside the healthcare system, and spent decades studying aging policy and end-of-life realities. This is not a takedown episode. This is a clarity episode. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Simplify Senior Transitions podcast, where we help families navigate senior living, real estate, and everything in between. Hosted by Senior Transition Specialist Dale Corpus, this show brings you expert insights, real solutions, and stress-free strategies to make senior transitions simple. Ready to dive in? Let's go.
And we're back, everybody. David, welcome to the show today. How are you?
Excellent. How are you?
I'm good. For my audience that doesn't know you yet, where are you based out of?
I'm in Carmel, California, so I'm right on the central coast. It's tough living here, I'm telling you, Dale.
It's a tough life. And obviously, we're going to talk about assisted living, but before we talk about assisted living itself, give us a quick snapshot of your background, gerontology, education, and what led you into senior care in the first place.
I will keep it as brief as humanly possible. I've got letters after my name. It's like alphabet soup. I am a gerontologist. I do have other degrees that will just stay in the background. They're not that useful for this purpose. I am a certified death doula. I am a former college instructor. I've done just a whole gambit along the continuum of senior care. You could imagine just about everything. I work in the court system as an expert witness in court cases. I'm a geriatric case manager. It's just a whole host of things. But what got me into this is probably more important and probably more entertaining to your audience. I was an industrial organizational psychologist working. I was a stuffed shirt, as they say. I had the suit and tie and the lanyard and the whole thing. And I was in Silicon Valley, and I was a human resource trainer and developer, and not really excited about my job, to be honest with you. It paid well, but I wasn't really helping people on an individual level. I was teaching the soldiers how to create more revenue for a big conglomerate. So I wasn't really aligned with what I was doing. And as the universe tends to do for us, if you have a mission, it'll let you know, and it'll let you know pretty quick. During that time that I was in the .com, both of my grandmothers simultaneously fell ill with dementia.
Okay.
So I was thrust into the caregiver role. I am Native American by heritage. And so our philosophy as a culture is that the senior is at the top of the food chain, which is, no offense to the Caucasian listeners, but we all know where the elder ranks in white America.
Yep.
They are seen but not heard. They're pushed aside. We are a very ageist culture in general. But in the Native American culture, as I'm assuming it is with your culture as well, the elder is at the top of the food chain. You take care of your elder. And while that's a noble gesture, it's a foolish one if you're trying to tackle dementia. The learning curve is so steep that you will make mistakes, and we did. First mistake was that we thought Alzheimer's was a blanketed term for memory loss or cognitive impairment. It is not, both of my grandmothers had different types of dementia. And then to make matters worse, my great uncle, one of their brothers, came in with a third different type of dementia, and they all had different behaviors. So could you imagine a family of 4 trying to take care of 3 elders at the same time with 3 different types of dementia? Crazy making.
Wow.
So we did what most good Americans do. We sought out senior care.
Okay.
And we chose the senior care foolishly based upon what it cost. So we kind of reverse engineered the thought. If it costs a lot, it must be good. So we put my Nana into care, and it was respite care, which is a short-term stay. It was less than 30 days. And this is an interesting nuance to the story. The reason why we put Nana into elder care for the respite stay was that Nana's doctor was also my mother's doctor. And while Nana's vitals and all of her health checked out, aside from her cognitive disruption, the doctor focused on my mother and said, your blood pressure is off the chart. Your pulse is almost immeasurable. You are burning out. You need to take care of you. I suggest you put your mother into a short-term stay and go take a respite. And so we did. We went on a vacation. We went to my mother's favorite place on the planet, which was Tahiti. And we came back to a literal disaster. And it was from that point forward that I decided, I love taking care of seniors. I do have some educational background in taking care of seniors. I'm not happy at the .com. If this is the best that's out there, I can make a really big difference in this sector. And so I dove in feet first. I left my .com job of 6 figures and reset at $7.75 an hour as a night shift supervisor for a Sunrise Assisted Living in Danville while I went back to school to get my gerontology master's.
Now, you just didn't study aging. Obviously, you built and operated assisted living. What was the biggest gap with what you expected assisted living to be and what it actually was once you were running it day to day?
So I was fortunate enough to have the foresight to not dive in blindly like a lot of people do. My clients, this is another service that I provide, is I facilitate people in creating care homes, and I'm their consultant. The outsider's perspective is often, oh, well, you're charging $8,000 a person times 6 in the smaller models, that's cha-ching. And no, it's not. So I had done the homework. I had worked, like I said, I wanted to make sure as a CEO that my staff knew that I had walked the same path that they had. So in the larger model, I did housekeeping, I did caregiving, I did med tech, I did activity leadership, I was a dementia care coordinator. I did just about everything that a person could do within the walls of an assisted living, and then took copious notes on what was successful. And unfortunately, the longer list was the things that weren't successful. And I took all those things and I put it into practice, and I started my first care home. The very first home that I bought, Dale, you in real estate will appreciate this, was an assisted living, and I lived in it with my family in a detached shed that, just for purposes of survival, we renamed the cottage, but it had no heat and it had no plumbing. And that's how we made the dream come true. And we lived in that small room externally for 2 years to make our dream come true. So from the outside perspective, flash forward 25 years later, I'm living in Carmel. I've got a home in Croatia. People think, oh, you just hit the jackpot and you were lucky. No, a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication and fortitude, and a lot of doing the right thing, with the temptation that I could have done something less than the right thing for more money. I could be much wealthier had I gone the path of the typical assisted living.
Yeah, you built that from ground up, pure blood, sweat, and tears at the same time. I mean, you're really dedicated to really making that difference, How did your academic background shape then how you approached care compared to others in the industry?
That was really part of I would say 80% of the driving force. I obviously had the passion, which is something that I talk about with my clients. And to be completely upfront with you, I'll get 10 calls every year minimum. Of those 10, 7 I choose not to work with. And there's this little quiz that I give people on Zoom. Okay, well, why do you want to work with the elderly? So if they don't have an immediate, quality, passionate response, I take note of that and I say, I'm just not available at the moment. Because if you don't have that going in, you can't fake that. It's not going to translate into quality care. So my foray into this was first passion, but then the education really sculpted it because I was learning in the long-term care administration track at San Francisco State University in the Master of Arts program, which I would later teach in for many years, was that here's where our goals were, here's where the industry was at the time, and here's how you get from here to here. And to be honest with you, we still have a long way to go. And in some respects, we're going backwards when it comes to providing truly person-centered quality care in assisted living.
One thing you mention is the idea that assisted living is often seen as a cash cow. And where do you think that perception comes from?
One of the biggest apprehensions, which is I'm going to try not to judge it, but one of the biggest apprehensions of someone placing their loved one is the costs. It's prohibitive, especially if you're doing the private pay route, which that's what assisted living offers, is just private pay at the moment. It's very pricey. So the thought in the heads of the family is, wow, these people must be making a mint because they're charging my mom $5,000 to $8,000 a month to do dementia care. You multiply that by however many beds there are, and you come up with this gigantic number. What you don't understand is that the vast majority of that is spent on personnel, on overhead, on all the operating costs. There is no dump truck full of cash being driven to the bank. And that's why I lived in a shed with my family for 2 years to make that dream come true. We just simply couldn't live anywhere else.
Yeah. I mean, from your experience and as an owner, what does the financial reality of running an assisted living facility actually look like then?
Well, let me dispel one of the major myths that I get with the clients that come to me and say, David, I see how successful you were in assisted living, and I want to be just like you in terms of your success. Their idea is that this will be turnkey, that they will set this whole organization up, they will train their personnel properly, and they'll walk away and it'll run itself. Absolutely not true. Untrue. You will be in your facility, in your community, more than 80 hours a week, period. Otherwise, you won't survive. You couldn't possibly afford to pay an administrator. There's no payroll for that role in a smaller community. In the larger communities, sure. And there's a different structure in the larger communities. And just to differentiate, there are smaller communities. They're still called residential care facilities for the elderly. You might hear the term RCFE. And this is something of a misnomer that is still out there and pervasive in the world of assisted living. Board and care is technically not a licensed community, but the larger models love to prioritize the smaller models. And how they do that is by using that terminology to make them sound less than, but they all have the same regulations. They all have to follow what's called Title 22 in California. So the same regulations apply to the smaller than the larger. They're both assisted living. The term assisted living, actually, here's some trivia for you, came as a marketing technique from Sunrise Assisted Living. And then all of the other RCFEs that were called facilities jumped onto the idea of assisted living, and now it's just called assisted living. But the largers and smallers are the same. They're under the same regulations. Don't be fooled when you hear board and care. Get a little concerned that whoever's saying those terms is not well educated.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what I'm hearing from you is, opening up, for example, a board and care home. A lot of folks in real estate are, real estate investors. They're talking about opening up board and care homes as another strategy just to build up a lot of passive income. But what I'm hearing from you is this is anything but passive. Is that fair to say?
It's fair to say. And, at the end of the day, too, let me put this out there. The folks that say, oh, I'm going to lease a house, I'm going to rent a house and build this business. Why would you do that? How I was able to retire at 50 was that I invested in real property.
Yeah.
If I were trying to just run the business, and that kind of tells you right there that it's not a cash cow, that if you don't own the dirt, that's what your real retirement is predicated upon. It's not the income. I put my kids through great schools. We never suffered from the income from the communities. And of course, you have to have more than one if you're going to do that properly. But then there's also a tipping point of, okay, where does the quality start to get diluted? How many can you run at once? For our purposes, it was just two. Many people have multiple 5, 6 different communities. As an investment, as a real estate investment, I mean, you just hit something on the head. The vast majority of assisted livings in California, larger specifically, are owned by real estate conglomerates. They are not care driven. These are not people that are gerontologists or social workers or nurses. They are real estate holding companies that, by the way, also care for people. So that's the state of the industry right now. And that's not a secret.
Okay. I mean, I want to follow up on that question. So who is really operating many assisted living communities today, and why does that matter for families?
Wow. This is your best question so far. So there are 2 or 3 large operators. They are the funding behind all of the big names that you'll see, Ivy Park and Atria and Sunrise and Aegis and you know, I could continue to name the names. Back when I first started 25 years ago, some of them were independently operated. Some of them had investor groups. Some of them had large investor groups. CalSTRS was one of them. And now there are 3 basically. And the rumor is that there's going to be down to 2 now that basically are behind every single one of the larger major providers right now. And so the good part of your question, the best part of your question is, why is that important? Well, when you're thinking about what your needs are as a family member, you're looking for a solution to your problem. Your problem is you can no longer care for the person that you love so much. You're looking for people that are talented and that their primary interest is to give quality care to improve the quality of life, which will likely extend the quantity of life of your senior, at the same time allowing you to be able to put your head on the pillow at night and get a good night's rest, knowing that they're safe and that they're getting their needs met. When you look at it from what I just explained to you, that the primary goal, the passion driving these larger facilities is monetary and not care, I'll let you decide if that's a good maneuver.
Okay. Now, what pressures do operators face that families rarely see? Staffing, maybe regulation, liability margins?
So, I mean, you name it. It's a 24-hour job. First of all, first and foremost, know this off camera here. This thing represents no sleep for 25 years. It will go off at any time of night. You will get calls. It's a 24/7 operation. You will get calls at 2 and 3 in the morning. I've been retired for almost 5 years now, and I still wake up with a cold sweat, checking to see if my phone has any messages in the middle of the night. It's some sort of PTSD, so to speak. That's one aspect that you don't necessarily think about. But the stress that goes on with staffing, like you said, it's not a well-respected career in the United States. So the pay, especially at the larger models are paying caregivers who are taking care of your loved one with tremendous amounts of responsibility, less than if they were working at In-N-Out Burger. So you've got bottom of the barrel type of personnel. You're hoping that your marketing and your reputation will attract quality people that are there for just to take care of the seniors and not to get a paycheck. The turnover in our field is unreal. There was one company I worked for, because I do a lot of turnaround work. I'll go into communities that are troubled, or some of them call them tier 3 in our world. And I will go in, assess what's going on, and turn the building. The vast majority, and it's no secret, but I say it from the mountaintops and nobody listens. If you don't have the magic M, morale, you don't have a program. If you can't keep your staff motivated with something other than money, you're dead in the water. Your turnover levels are going to just absolutely collapse the quality of care that you're able to provide. So staffing is number one. And in fact, I've said this. I was speaking at CALA, the California Assisted Living Association's conference last year, and I'll be again this year in Palm Springs in the fall. I had made a comment, and this, keep in mind, this is my cohort I'm speaking to, and the look of shock on their face when I asked them, who's the most important people in your buildings? And these are high-end CEO level people that are in the audience, and they almost immediately knee-jerk said, well, the patients, the residents. And I said, try again. And well, they were very confused, and there's a lot of, dull roar conversation in between them. I said, the personnel are your most important people in your building. Without personnel, don't even bother marketing toward families to get your patients or your residents. You're missing the mark. If it doesn't begin and end with your personnel, you've got nothing. And this is the state of the industry and always has been. And the secret to my success has been to attract, retain, and empower quality personnel so that we had a consistency of care and that they were truly happy. And I did some unorthodox things, especially in the last community I built. We had a tiki bar on the roof, right?
Yeah.
We had a nap room in the community where if you wanted to take a nap during your break, we allocated one room, one unit to doing just that. And then the only rule was that it couldn't be already occupied.
Yeah.
But you would never see that in the larger model because that room is a little box on an Excel spreadsheet that's worth X amount of dollars every year. Though taking that unit offline would make someone freak out. But there's no reason to have that unit at all if you're not attracting the quality personnel that drives your care, that drives your reputation.
Yeah. I know one red flag to, when a family is looking at an assisted living community, if they're comparing one or another, you should actually look at which one has a higher staff turnover ratio, right? Because that says something, right? We're speaking to this right now. And so, what I want to segue to? Let's segue into what families aren't told. When families tour assisted living, what are they usually paying attention to and what are they missing?
Wow. So sales in assisted living makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck. The things that these poor souls are trained to share with families, and more importantly, to not share with families, puts those salespeople in a conflict of interest, of their own interest, because they want to do the right thing, but they also are paid to fill the building. Census, the big C word, census, is prime. And so if they aren't able to keep the building at a certain level of census occupancy, they don't have a job anymore. So they're kind of put in this really tough position. The families are walking through those doors looking for a solution. And to a large extent, because they need that solution, and because 90% of the time or better, it's urgent, you've got a discharge planner at the hospital breathing down your neck at 4 p.m. on a Friday. Your mom needs to be out of our hospital. You need to make a decision. They just look at one or two, they'll call 3 or 4, and they land in a care facility. They're deliberately putting the blinders on because they don't want to see that this might not be the best decision because they need an immediate solution. And this is just a ripe environment for people to be misplaced. It's a ripe environment for predatory practices. It's a ripe environment for making horrible decisions that you as a family member who was responsible for that placement that will live with regret for the rest of your life. This is no small decision to be made, but it's made in haste, without education, and oftentimes deliberately misguided by outside entities that have a conflict of interest, like placement agents.
Yeah. Now, what are some questions families should be asking, but almost never do?
Well, there's a lot of preconceived notions. When families come in, they make a lot of assumptions. One of the assumptions, and then I'll answer your question directly. One of the assumptions is that, well, if I put mom or dad into a care home, they're going to get one-on-one attention, and they've been falling at home. Once they move in, they won't fall anymore. So let me dial down and dumb down the term disappointment. Disappointment is simply expectations not met. So if you're coming in thinking mom's not going to fall anymore, and that's what you're led to believe, I got news for you. She's going to continue to fall. It's a question of how quickly she'll get response. A lot of care facilities don't divulge that.
Yeah.
They're thinking that that's on their mind because they're not being asked. One of the big misconceptions, and because, like I said, I spent a lot of time as an expert witness in court cases that deal with abuse and neglect of seniors, that's one of the ways that you can start off on the wrong foot. I also hear a lot of, well, we've been to 3 other places. Mom's lived in 3 other places, and now we're looking at a 4th because she just keeps falling. As an operator, I'm just like, oh, no. Let me educate you and perhaps refer you to somewhere else, because that is just not going to happen. You're not going to stop somebody from falling. There is no technology that stops people from falling quite yet, but there are technologies in how to lower the response time. So that's one major thing. Another thing that's not divulged, and sometimes deliberately, I will say, is that continuum of care is really up to the provider. While Title 22 allows us to provide care from very low need to all the way into the death and dying phase, a lot of providers only operate within this, or they'll operate within this, and they don't tell you this. And of course, what you want is a permanent solution. You don't want to move mom in only to have to move her out 6 months from now. And so what you'll find is that the care communities won't say, oh, by the way, we don't do dementia care here. Or, oh, by the way, we don't do hospice here. Oh, by the way, we don't work with death doulas here. We don't facilitate end of life. Or, oh, we don't do insulin-dependent diabetic work because we don't have nurses on staff. These are the things that you find out after you've given this gigantic upfront non-refundable deposit and have paid a few months into the care. And all of a sudden the light bulb goes on. Oh, no. If mom gets dementia, she's moving out. Oh, no. If mom starts to actively die, in the worst possible time to move a human being, she'd have to be moved out to another community that does do that care. And again, I kind of alluded to there's a little bit of collusion where the placement agents who get paid, they're called bed brokers, they get paid top dollar for placement into these care homes, are feeding them these seniors that they'll get back and place again, which I'm lobbying to make that illegal. You shouldn't have revisitism in the senior placement sector, because that is a true and obvious conflict of interest. Because you're getting $10,000 to place this elder. Of course, there's the thought in the back of your head, well, I know this place is not going to be a permanent solution. That means I might get $20,000 from this patient. It's fugly. And I'm telling you, not a lot has changed, Dale. I'm sad to report, as much as I've been that voice in the dark and swimming upstream, not a lot's changed.
Let's talk staffing. How does staffing really work behind the scenes, and how does that impact consistency of care?
Oh, here we go. Okay, so this is a nut. This is a good nut to crack. What you'll often hear is the rhetoric of staffing ratio, right?
Yeah.
So we've got a 6-to-1 care ratio, and they're beating their chest like that's a good thing, right? Well, the smaller communities who tend to be 6 beds are by definition a minimum of 6-to-1.
Right.
So the larger communities, who are oftentimes 15-to-1, will say, well, we're 10-to-1. Obviously, the more intimate care is going to be in the smaller homes, the smaller assisted livings. But some of them will boast in the dementia units or whatnot and say, we've got a 6-to-1 care ratio. So let me break that down for you. That number, 6-to-1, in my care homes where we took on acute behaviors that other communities wouldn't take on, would be criminal. We needed 2 or 3-to-1 care for these individuals. So what I'm discussing is called acuity. So our acuity of care in my communities, they were formerly called Choctaw House after my heritage, my acuity level was high. So 6-to-1 would be neglect. So when you ask about care ratios, it's not a static number that you can say across the board, well, we've got a 6-to-1 care ratio. If you've got high acuity clientele, you're missing the mark. If you're borderline independent living, 6-to-1 might work. So don't fall into the trap of the rhetoric of the care ratio. And you'll hear placement agents use that terminology. Again, they're not educated. They're not in the field. They're kind of a pseudo industry that's not regulated. That's kind of a adjunct to the assisted living world, but not a welcomed one. Nobody wants to work with placement agents from the standpoint of the operator, because that's a gigantic cost. Yeah. We just talked about cash cow. Well, if you're paying front end for these referrals at 10 a pop, now you're kind of getting the idea of what operating costs look like. And then again, to demystify what a placement agent does, they're contracted with communities, but only communities that have a problem with census. I've never partnered with a placement agency because I didn't need to rely upon them. I didn't have to pay them for referrals because my reputation was filling my buildings. So when you use a placement agent, you would never get my name. You would never get a referral to my community because I never held a contract with them. You're only immediately going to get the lowest bidder on, and immediately you're questioning, okay, well, why this place when I know I've heard great things about this place? The reason why they won't refer you to them is that they won't get paid. There's the quick and dirty definition of what's called bed brokering.
You said that dementia care is often misunderstood. What do families need to understand before placing a loved one with cognitive decline?
First of all, oh boy, I mean, this could be literally an 8-hour class, and to some extent it has been in the past. So I'll just hit the finer points. Yeah. Number one, a general practitioner they should not be the one to diagnose your elder. You need to go to a neurologist. The reason why I say that is most practitioners don't understand the nuances of dementia. When I see a physician's report, which is the LIC 602, and there's on the line of diagnosis, it says Alzheimer's disease, I immediately go, you need to change your doctor. You cannot diagnose Alzheimer's disease while the person's still alive. And when a doctor writes that on the line, they're outing themselves as not being educated in the world of dementia. Dementia is an overarching umbrella that is a basic understanding. It's like cancer versus skin cancer versus brain cancer versus lung cancer. Dementia has a spectrum of symptoms, and then there are diseases that fall under that. Alzheimer's just happens to be one. And because it's in the news a lot, it's the most popular or commonly understood. The reality is you cannot diagnose that with a high level of accuracy, even neurologists. And most of the medical system, because seniors get the least amount of attention, they won't go through the process of getting an MRI to rule out other dementias. Why is that important? Well, what's the first thing that we do in the American Western medical model, Dale, when someone's diagnosed? What's the first thing a doctor does after diagnosis?
Gives them a prescription for a drug.
Boom. We call it treatment, but you went right to the heart of it. Treatment in America means meds. Yeah. Right. So imagine this. You're a client of mine. You've come in, you've used your general practitioner. They said your mom's got Alzheimer's. They give her medications for Alzheimer's. You move her into my community and she starts to fail and the meds don't seem to be working. Who are you going to hold responsible for that? Me. So it's in the operator's best interest, but keep in mind, these people are hotel, hospitality, MBA, real estate people. They don't get it and they won't get it. They may hire nurses occasionally, but they welcome this problem. And then I see them in court as the expert witness. So that you've already started off on a bad foot with dementia care. You need to be an advocate for your loved one. You need to go to a neurologist and you need to demand to rule out the other types of dementias. You can, while it won't be necessarily accurate because some dementias can't be diagnosed, you can at least rule out some. So let me run down that rabbit hole a little bit further with you, Dale. Mom doesn't have Alzheimer's. Mom's got what's called multi-infarct dementia, or also known as vascular dementia. So she's getting medications to try to stop the progression of her memory loss. Meanwhile, if she's getting the wrong medications, what is she not getting? She's not getting the right medications. If she's getting the wrong ones, she's not getting the right ones. So she's not getting the anti-stroke meds. She's not getting the blood thinners. And she starts to have strokes and she continues to fail. Who's guilty in all of this? the provider for not letting you know all about this so that you can advocate for your loved one and they don't go through the loss and the trauma and the suffering unnecessarily. So that's one misnomer of the dementia world. I could go on and on, but that's probably the one thing that I want to emphasize the most is, first of all, don't let the medical world stonewall you.
Okay.
Stand up for your elder. If you brought in a teenager with the same symptoms as your grandmother or your mother, they would run them through every test known to man. So why don't they when it's a senior? Well, she's doing well for her age. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that and how it's still like fingernails on a chalkboard. They just write seniors off. So you've got to be an advocate. And by having a placement agency by proxy, not being an advocate. And these are the pitfalls that you fall into.
I understand. In your experience, what are the earliest warning signs that a placement may not be the right fit?
Well, I would say that the most obvious is that their needs are not getting met immediately. There's a lot of communities that will take on clientele because they need to fill that bed and, it's the end of the quarter, so we need to bring this person in. They may not be exactly what we care for. They may not be a true fit. The lack of ability to communicate with the population at large. A lot of people become alienated because they've got cognitive problems and they're struggling to communicate, and all the other people are high functioning. So they're being shunned by the high functioning people. And they also feel like because they can't communicate properly, they're intimidated. And so they sequester themselves in their room. That's one of the very first signs. Is you come in and you see all these people outside and they're active and they're doing things. And then yet mom is sitting in the dark room staring at the television and kind of retracted. That's not a fit. Now there's going to be something called transition trauma. That's normal. And it can last up to 3 months, but that's acclimating. These are the obvious signs that it's not the right fit, that the programming is not right, and that it's likely you're going to end up moving out in 3 to 6 months.
Yeah. Okay. Dementia. Like dementia care is often marketed heavily, but what does good dementia care actually require?
In a word, passion. I would say the secondary is 100% education. Most of these communities, I will go in as a consultant, or I'll go in as a geriatric case manager, and I'll speak to the executive director, who's very rarely a gerontologist, which should be a head scratcher, right? Or they don't have a nursing background, or they're not a social worker. And they'll say things, well, we do Alzheimer's care. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So somehow you have the magic way of diagnosing these people and you care for just people with Alzheimer's. It's those little things that are like these red flags that pop up. Good dementia care comes from fantastic programming, excellent training, and hands-on, one-on-one, personalized and person-centered care. Not coming in and not knowing your residents' names, for instance, and referring to them as room numbers, which sometimes that happens. It's personalized care. You know the families, you're intimately involved. It's not a 40-hour a week job that you leave and it just stays behind you. You're constantly immersed and you're on this journey with them. And ideally, because dementia does end up doing exactly what everything else does to us eventually, Dale, we all have the ability to be born, and the only other thing that we can say for sure we have in common is we die. So do you have programming for end-of-life care, which is also not common? It's not as common as it should be, and there's also a lot of misnomer about that as well.
Yeah. Why is there no quarterback for dementia the way there is for cancer or heart disease?
What do you mean by quarterback? I'm curious about that.
Yeah. So like, there's just no go-to person just that kind of just directs where to go next for, just there's so many different types of dementia. Like, why is there just no one person that we could go to just to kind of direct everything for dementia?
That's a tough one. And I can give you the sardonic, jaded version of my answer would be that we are ageist and we are terrified of end of life. And when we look at our seniors that are aging, we feel our own mortality. And so we shy away from it. I found this to be interesting. I was at a party. I lived in Napa. That's where my care homes were. And I would go to these parties and the women in the kitchen would be around the big island drinking their Chardonnay, and they could tell you absolutely everything about the preschool, the teacher, the curriculum. But when, like you said, you're in the sandwich generation, but when I would say, hey, what do you know about senior living for your grandparents? The room would fall silent. That is a cultural phenomenon, Dale. And then to be honest with you, as much as I'm an advocate for seniors, the clients are actually making it hard for me because the care communities and these pseudo industries that are popping up like placement only exist in a world where we as the client are not advocates for our seniors because we don't have the education and we're not brave enough to confront our own fears about death and dying. That's really the bottom line.
Yeah, I get that. Now, what role should families realistically expect assisted living to play? And where does outside support become essential?
Great question. I know I'm really beating the larger communities up. So allow me one last opportunity. We used to joke about the fact that most of the large communities have a semicircular driveway and a porta cachet, and they drive mom in, they push her out, and they just keep going and don't look back. That's kind of what happens in most cases in assisted living. What a family should be expecting or should expect to do is be involved. Let's just start there at the bottom level. Be involved at some level. Most adult children, there's always one dutiful daughter or son that does the placement, and then the SIBs. The SIBs are my biggest nightmare as a provider. It's not personnel. It's not the physicians. It's not the disease. It's families that I have the biggest issue with. And I teach an 8-hour class to providers on managing families in long-term care because you've got all of these nuances. You've got the one that's got the eyes on the prize. Mom, when are you going to go? I need that yacht. I need to inherit your house. I'm entitled. And then you've got the one there's always an addict. There's always an addict doing something stupid in the background. It's really tough. If I didn't have a degree in psychology, I don't know that I would have navigated this world as easily as I have. You have to be prepared to manage the families more than you are the clients. And I'm here to tell you 100%, fully disclosive. When I'm interviewing clients to see if they're a fit for my facilities, my communities, I have a dual-sided assessment. I can take care of your mom, but there's no way I'm bringing you all into my community because you guys are a liability. So the families have to feel like they can be a partner with assisted living and not feel like, all right, we've taken care of this. We're not mechanics. Okay. It's not a quick fix, one single problem. It's a relationship, but most families don't see it that way. They turn through the driveway, they come back in 6 months, and then they're shocked. What's happened to mom? It's like, well, she's declined steadily from the time you put her in here. You just haven't seen her, so it's a shock. That's what I wanted to say so many times, but I had to keep my cool. I had to be the diplomat. But that's really what I'm thinking. And again, it's a double-edged sword for a provider that's passionate like me. I want you to have a great experience, but you're making it really hard for me.
Yeah, you have a good point. I didn't even think about that because you're interviewing, the potential resident and you want to do a good job for them. But at the same time, though, too, you're interviewing the family to make sure that you could get along and they won't be a liability. And just, you're just making sure it's going to work out.
Dale, there are some cases that were so obvious that I wasn't going to work with them. I remember one early on in my career. We had this son who was, kind of dragged into it. His sister was making most of the decisions.
Yeah.
I was going to be their second care facility because the things didn't work out in the first one, which is not that uncommon. And again, avoidable if you're doing the work. So his comment was, they let mom fall 3 times and I was ready to punch that administrator. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, and this is over with. We're done. I'll get back to you. Don't call me. I'll call you. No way am I going to engage with a family member that's so far out there. And emotion is a huge driver. And in fact, I wrote an article for Plaintiff Magazine talking about the court cases that I work on. The vast majority of them are not true neglect and abuse. The vast majority of them are hinged upon emotion. And that emotion is primarily guilt or greed. Well, we paid that care facility $200,000 over the span of time that mom was there. We want some of it back. There's a lot of that going on, and there's a lot of predatory attorneys. You see them in Los Angeles, especially big billboards. Bed sore is abuse. Is it?
Yeah. Kind of to wrap up the questioning around dementia, if you could reset expectations for families dealing with dementia, what would you want them to understand from day one?
Ooh, boy. Okay, so I'm going to go a little divergent from the tone of my interview so far. I would say, as dark as it might seem in this moment with your loved one, this is a progressive disease. Don't miss the fact that now is something you'll look back upon in 6 months to a year from now and think of it fondly. As things progress, as she becomes nonverbal, as she has dramatic incontinence, as she has skin breakdown, as she has anxiety and agitation and becoming combative, you're going to look back at now and wish that you had absorbed and appreciated the now. This is something that I caution my family members because they're so anxious and uptight about what's happening now. And to say it bluntly, when your mom's dying, you're going to wish you paid more attention and spent more quality time with her in this stage. So that's something that I would tell families across the board. And I know I keep adding things to the list of things I've done. For 13 years, I was a group facilitator, support group facilitator for the Alzheimer's Association. So there's nothing I haven't seen. And that advice goes so far, especially with someone who's in it in the moment. And to have a group of people that are very homogenous, they're all experiencing it, but some are at the end of it. The people at the end of it will always nod their head and say, yeah, I wish I had done that. So there are darker days to come. Today is a lighter day than it will be in the future. There are also some nuances of dementia that are actually gifts. And I know that sounds absolutely absurd. Trust me when I say that. And I'm going to be including that in one of my upcoming books. And that's not about dementia per se, but it talks about the gifts that come in the absence. The whole concept of God closes a door, he opens a window. Dementia has a lot of gifts. And to some degree, when I would go into my dementia units, I would feel more at home and I would not want to leave because there are no rules. The judgment's gone from the brain. You can do whatever you want and there's no penalties for it. It's actually kind of a blissful existence. And to some degree, you see the very core of who people are, and that mask that they've been put up in front of themselves because of society is gone, and they have no burden to do that anymore. So there are gifts. I'd love to talk about that more at length another time, but there's your answer.
Yeah, thank you. Because you've worn so many hats in senior living, senior care, what do you wish more families understood about how the senior care ecosystem really works?
First and foremost, the echo, I just keep saying it, don't wait to do your research. When you come in as a provider, I see that you've done the research. You've got a stack of information. You are armed with as much information as humanly possible. You're going to have a better experience than someone who comes in cold, or worse, someone who comes in represented by someone else by proxy. And again, I keep kind of poking at the placement industry, but these people are setting the families up for failure because basically, here, take care of my mom for me. And then they disappear. And you're now in the driver's seat, but you don't know how to drive, right? These other people come in fully prepared, fully licensed. They know how to drive. They've practiced. They're going to have a exponentially better experience in the ecosystem of senior living than those who don't. And it's really like anything else, Dale. What you put in is what you get out. So if you're just phoning it in, you're not going to have a great experience. And as much as I'm in court, I'm not supposed to evoke my own emotion. But when I see somebody who's indignant and sitting back and, well, this blew up and we didn't see it coming, there's onus on you, brother. You didn't do your homework. You didn't fully go through this with the intention of doing the right thing. If we all had centered ourselves to that concept, there wouldn't be as many issues. And a lot of these pseudo industries wouldn't exist at all.
That makes complete sense. Well, how can families advocate more effectively without becoming adversarial?
Actually, this is an interesting concept, adversarial. So most assisted living communities, the larger communities, you ask any executive director behind the scenes, what is your feeling? What's the temperature with your decision makers, your family members? And most of them would say adversarial. And that's the fault of the company's mission. It's the fault of the programming. It's the fault of the executive director. When a family comes in and they're in need, they are my baby. They are the people I just overwhelm with attention and we get connected. And I say this hand to God, I've had thousands of patients, right? I've had over 1,000 patients as a death doula, and almost every single one of them I'm still friends with. This is an intimate relationship that you establish with another human being. To lackadaisically just come in and think that things are going to go well on its own is absolutely a misnomer. So I don't have adversarial relationships with families. If they are the squeaky wheel, 9 times out of 10, Dale, I'm big enough to admit they're seeing something in my blind spot that I'm not seeing. And this is going back all the way back to go full circle. In the .com industry, I was teaching this class as a week long called A Complaint is a Gift. And it's how the mindset of understanding that a gift is not an insult. It's not a condemnation of your abilities. It's an opportunity. And so when you get one of those gifts, even if it's high charged with emotion, the right response is thank you, because they're telling you something that you're not aware of most often, and you can fix it. Employ them and appoint them as a point person to oversee this as a team. And now you've got a relationship. You don't have this. This is what lands you in court. This is harmony.
Now, as we wrap up this episode, any final words, or even what's, one thing you hope every listener remembers from this conversation?
Wow. So because I'm so steeped in what I've done for the last close to 30 years, I tend to speak in terms that are off-putting or even repellent to people. I'm Dr. Death to some people because I talk about death and dying as if it's a trip to the grocery store. But what I want to say to everyone who's considering going into assisted living, understand we all exit. Some of us exit pleasantly in our sleep, blissfully unaware of what's going on. Others have trauma, and you have to plan for that. And I don't pretend to know what your relationship is with your family members. And that's something that I have to filter out when I see someone that gets pushed out of the car. It's my mom.
Yeah.
I get it. Some people had poor childhoods, but you do have a responsibility. And this is where the edict comes from my culture as being Native American. Despite your relationship with your elder, you need to give them that respect. And you show that respect by doing due diligence to find the right fit and to be a partner with the provider. So the big, if I were to say, what's the big takeaway? Do your homework, and don't do it the night before it's due.
Yeah.
Do it early. This is echoed over and over. If I could ask anybody in assisted living, and you prove me wrong, go ahead. Go to an assisted living, talk to a family member, ask them, what's one thing you would have done differently? They would all say, man, we would have started research much earlier. Period. That is an issue culturally. We don't embrace end of life, period, because it's too hard for us. We've demonized it, and we're afraid of it. But the weird thing is, I can tell you that a number of things may befall you, but there's only one thing for certain: we all die. It's up to you to decide what kind of quality you want for your loved one or for yourself.
Perfect. David, thank you for this conversation. What you shared today isn't about tearing down assisted living. It's about helping families walk into decisions with their eyes open, their expectations grounded, and their loved ones protected. For everyone listening, here's what I hope you take away. Good decisions don't come from glossy brochures. They come from asking better questions and education. So if this episode gave you clarity, language, or confidence, that's exactly why this podcast exists. If you're new here, this is the Simplify Senior Transitions podcast. My mission is to make senior care less overwhelming and more human. If you found this episode helpful, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps more families find the show. Share this episode with a friend, sibling, or colleague navigating aging parent decisions. And if your family is facing a senior living transition and you're unsure what to do with the home, the timing, or the next step, you can learn more about my services at www.simplifyseniortransitions.com. Thanks for being here. Thank you, David, for being on this episode with me today.
My pleasure. Absolutely, Dale. Thank you.
You're welcome. And for everyone else, I'll see you on the next episode of the Simplify Senior Transitions podcast.